I'm Tim Kilduff, and this is Business Matters. This is a program not just about Hopkinton businesses, but more importantly about the people who manage and run those businesses. And we're fortunate to have, I think, one of Hopkinton's leading business people, Scott Richardson from GRLA Architects. Scott, thanks for being here. We have got a lot of material to cover, so if you don't mind, let's jump into it.
Sounds good.
An architect. How does one become one?
Well, basically you need to have an interest in buildings and spatial relationships, and once you kind of feel you have that propensity and interest, obviously there's a lot of schooling involved. My father was an architect, so I was kind of exposed to kind of design and buildings early on. I used to cover my books in school with blueprints, so that was kind of a neat thing. So I kind of got interested in architecture really early, and pursued it in high school even through mechanical drafting classes and some art classes, and came up to Boston to go to school, and kind of the rest is history, as they say.
Where'd you go to school in Boston?
At the Boston Architectural College, right on Newbury Street.
Is that program, because there are people who are going to be interested in this in terms of the kind of training it takes. Mm-hmm. Is that a 4-year program, 2-year, 5-year?
No, it's actually more along the lines of a 6-year program.
Oh, wow.
Because it's typically you're taking evening classes, and they have kind of a work program. You're basically encouraged, motivated, and obviously preferably to work in an architect's or engineer's office during the day, and you take your classes in the evening. So it takes usually 6 years to go through to get your bachelor's. They also have a Master's of Architecture program, an interior design certificate program, and they have a whole sustainable design program now.
So the course content, how's that divided?
Well, a lot of it's the history and theory of architecture, a lot of history of architecture through the ages, structures, drafting classes. You still have to learn how to draw by hand still, even though after you get through the first couple of years, you're doing mostly things on computer now. So it's a lot of design studios. You're always taking a design studio, which is the most intense classes there. To basically, you're given a problem, you have to come up with a solution, and then you're critiqued, obviously in front of your fellow students, and sometimes mercilessly. But it's kind of trial by fire, because eventually you're going to be developing design solutions for your clients, and you want to obviously develop the best design solutions possible.
Now, we have some boards, and there's the element, the art part of what of what you do. Is that, are you born with that creative?
Well, certainly you really need to have a sense of spatial relationships. You basically need to be able to visualize what you're designing in your mind, because that's the first step to really kind of putting it down on paper. So you really need to have that sense of what spaces feel like, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. You've been in buildings where you go in and you say, wow, this is a really nice space. You've been in other buildings where it's like, this is terrible, what's wrong with this? So you have kind of an innate sensibility about what feels good, but you really want to be able to have that sensibility and innate ability to visualize it and then put it on paper.
I've never asked you this, but I've always wanted to. Are architects in part frustrated artists?
Well, there's certainly the art component to what we do. It's artistic. It's kind of the convergence of art and technology is kind of what, kind of some of the phrases that go along with architecture. But I like art. I paint. I usually do abstract paintings. I'm a pretty good photographer also. So you kind of do, as an architect, you do see a lot of architects that also do drawings, sculpture, artistry, and photography as well. So. Yeah.
Okay, so you go through this 6-year program. Mm-hmm. Then what was the next progression? You didn't jump immediately into running your own business, did you?
Almost. Wow. Interestingly, my story is a little different than kind of most architects coming out of school. You then basically need to have work. You go through an intern development program that you basically need to have so many credit hours of work documented through an agency called NCARB, which is National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. So it's kind of like getting the criteria and qualifications in order to sit for the exam. You know, when you're becoming a lawyer, you have to sit for the bar. So basically, once you've accumulated enough hours in the work environment, you then make application to NCARB to then sit for the exam. So the exam now is about 9 parts. Covers everything from history, structures, to design, and it's all computerized now. When I took it back in 1980, it was all by hand. You know, you fill in the blanks and or design a whole building by hand in 12 hours. So it was pretty grueling. So you basically, once you then take and pass the 9-part tests, you then are a registered architect in Massachusetts.
Do they still do the design of building in 9 hours
yes,
or 12 hours?
It's a full day. It's a 12-hour design problem. Yes, still. Yep. So
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The pressure must be immense.
It's intense, but you kind of go through that in school because you're basically in your design studio. Usually have a weekly assignment and a weekly presentation. So you do need to diligently work on your design solutions to have a viable presentation in class. So, kind of the exam is kind of the culmination of that you have just a finite amount of time to complete that.
Let's talk about starting your own business.
Mm-hmm.
If you started early, if that's not the typical track, what motivated you to start your own business, and
mm-hmm.
how did that get started?
Yeah, well, typically, kind of just to give an overview, you typically would work for a variety of firms when you first get out of school to get that work experience. You might find a firm that you really like, and then you kind of stay there and kind of rise up through the ranks to become project architect, maybe project manager, maybe an associate, maybe a principal. In my case, I actually met my business partner, Mike Gorman, at school. At the Boston Architectural College. And we actually started working together for a local developer in the Metro West area. And through that, we actually started our own office, a design office, to design and document residential projects for this builder as well as a lot of the builders in the area. So we kind of just then de facto, after he was kind of having financial problems, started our own office. It wasn't really strategic planning. It was kind of one of those things that just kind of happened. 1976 was when we started the office outside of that relationship, outside of that developer relationship.
That's rather bold, isn't it?
It was rather bold. On the other hand, there weren't a lot of job opportunities in 1976. The economy was kind of slow, not as slow as it was a few years ago. But we had a client base. So we basically started our own office.
Gorman Richardson Architects at that point?
It was Gorman Richardson Associates.
Associates?
Yes. Yep.
What kind of people did you have to bring around you? Because obviously 2 guys can't do this on their own.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the BAC is, again, it's a work curriculum program. So whenever we needed drafting help, people to draw what we've designed, we had a ready resource at the BAC for those for the production work of our houses and our small commercial projects. We actually did have a third partner for a while. He was registered architect Dave Carey. So we had kind of a full firm there at that point, but then he moved on to join a larger firm in Boston. So we just kind of regrouped as, again, Gorman Richardson Architects at that point. But we had a ready resource in employees through the BAC, and slowly develop relationships with a lot of the corporations and industries in the Metro West area, and kind of found our niche in a lot of the corporate and technology work.
So there's a professional skill part. I get that. You guys were bold, but you had obviously you had the skill sets in terms of the architectural side of the house. But how about the business side?
Well, that's one thing, unfortunately, they don't teach you a lot of,
right.
if any, in architecture school, because it's all about the creativity and the design solutions. So that is something that we continually still struggle with, is, hey, we'd rather sit down and design a building than run a business. So, but we know we've kind of have our own niche niches within the firm of what we are good at. And so the business, generally if you do good work and treat people fairly, that you should stay in business, and that's kind of what we've been able to accomplish.
You started. Where was your first office?
First office was in Ashland, right on Main Street, and we ended up then sharing office space with a civil engineer. Then moved up to 30 Main Street, the old mill buildings in Ashland, which coincidentally we are working on right now for a new owner to reposition those into more of a mixed-use complex. So that's kind of a full circle, if you will. So we were in Ashland for about 18 years and then moved to Hopkinton again about 18 years ago. We've been in business about 36 years. So we've been in Hopkinton for about half of our existence.
Wow. And now the name of the firm has changed.
Yes. So Steve Lewis is our design principal. He's been our design principal for a few years. And a few years ago, he's been with us for over 20 years. Fantastic designer, very instrumental in assisting in the creation of our design solutions to our projects. And it was time to really recognize him for his contributions to the firm and made him a partner. So it's Gorman, Richardson, Lewis Architects now.
GRL Architects. Mm-hmm. Main Street, Hopkinton. Mm-hmm. Why Hopkinton?
Well, we were, as I mentioned, for about 18 years in Ashland. One of our main clients in the 80s turned out to be EMC Corporation. We were kind of outgrowing our space at the mill building there in Ashland. It's a very linear building. It's kind of hard to get kind of cohesive space that works well together. So we started looking around, and One Ash Street was available for rent, the whole second floor. And so we said this is a great location. So we were there for a number of years. Obviously got to experience the start of the marathon from the front row seat. And then basically, as we continued to grow, we needed more space. So when the office building, this office building, was under construction, we secured the second floor.
What kind of work for EMC? So in particular, if I wanted to see your work in an EMC facility, is it visible? Is it external, internal, both?
Yes, it's both. We've done most of their work on South Street. We've done their corporate headquarters up on the hill on 176
Really?
South Street. Yep. And that's about 700,000 square feet of space. And then we worked with them when they first moved to town in the 171 South Street building. Just interior renovations, because that building was already there. And then we designed the connector that connects the two brick buildings there at 171. So that's kind of a metal and glass facade building that connects those two buildings and creates a main entry lobby. But we've done renovations in pretty much all of their buildings up and down South Street and throughout the greater Metro West area.
That headquarters building is how big?
It's almost 700,000 square feet.
You know, I think what's amazing to me is that recently I decided I would take a drive around that building, and was taken back with the size of it.
Yeah, it's a big building.
But yet it's designed in such a way that it doesn't project an enormous facility. I'm sure that's part of what you did.
Yeah, it basically is kind of a segmented approach, so that you're not seeing kind of the whole mass of the building from any one elevation. So, and then there's an interior courtyard that gives you a little bit of daylight and green space within the building.
Now, it's been a tough short period. Maybe not so short in terms of general economics, and I'm sure your business reflects those kind of trends, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, over the years, we've been through all the kind of the mild recessions to the major one in 2008. So our business is very much tied into what's happening in the construction industry. So when either private or public companies start to not build or renovate, then we feel the pinch. So we certainly did have to downsize starting in 2008. 2008, 2009, 2010 were pretty flat years. We were busy, but we weren't out straight the way we had been previously.
Right.
The past 2 years have been significantly. We've seen an increase in business. Companies are spending more money doing upgrades and renovations, and we're starting to see a trend towards being extremely busy again. So.
Look, as this conversation evolves, it's becoming apparent to me that there are a whole host of avenues that we could go down, and I want to continue to push through. But thinking ahead, I'm hoping that you'll be able to come back, because I know you're doing a considerable amount of work in Hopkinton, and it might be helpful for all of us if you were able to come back and we could focus purely on the local community stuff. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Well, and then before we go much further, you've got a couple of boards behind us, and one is some work that you're doing in Hopkinton, but I think it's important for people to get an idea on the variety of work that you're doing, the projects that you're currently involved in outside of Hopkinton. Let's focus there first, although there's a big one that's going on right now.
Yeah, so I could probably chat to that. Obviously, the Caliper Life Sciences down on Elm Street and Parkwood Drive is actually a repeat client. We've done quite a bit of work for them over the past 6 or 7 years, and they were purchased by Perkin-Elmer about a year ago. And basically, management at Caliper convinced Perkin-Elmer that Hopkinton's a great place to expand their businesses and some of their business units. So we are currently underway with about 5 different projects at both buildings: a large warehouse addition, a large office, 2-story office addition to the main building on Elm Street, as well as clean rooms and other laboratory improvements within the existing buildings. So it's fast-paced, multifaceted improvements and expansions for Caliper, now Perkin-Elmer.
I think the community sometimes doesn't understand the breadth of some of these, a project like this. Do you have a sense of roughly how big their facility was, and then now how big it's going to be?
Their existing facility was about 160,000 square feet with the 2 buildings, and we're adding a 40,000 square foot office building and a 15,000 square foot warehouse facility. So we're getting up over 200,000 square feet. With plans, actually, we have projection for another 10 to 20,000 square feet as their needs are increase for staffing.
Now, the size increases. I'm assuming that brings more employees into the community as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Jobs.
Yep. They're looking at 200 plus new jobs amongst all the expansions.
Wow.
So,
Subaru of New England.
Subaru of New England. We've been working on this project for a little while. It's down in Norwood. Basically, Subaru of New England is the distributor of parts and service technician training, as well as distribution of Subarus to dealerships throughout New England. They are in need of a new warehouse facility, corporate headquarters, and training facility. And so that's what this complex is designed to accommodate. It's a total of about 200,000 square feet down in Norwood, and should be under construction. They're starting the site work right now, and should be substantially under construction sometime in the spring.
Now, I'm thinking that you could say that these are not by urban, I mean a downtown area.
Correct, yes.
Are you currently working on any projects that are in Center City anywhere?
Sure. So, well, one key project we're working on, which I think is back here, is the kind of the transformation, if you will, of the Worcester Telegram and Gazette building, which is in downtown Worcester. It fronts on Franklin Street, 20 Franklin Street, which then faces the City Hall. It's a building that was built in the early 1900s and then added to repeatedly over the years, and extends all the way to Federal Street. So that's a total of about 145,000 square feet of space that is really a combination of about 6 or 7 buildings. So our task is fairly challenging in trying to create a cohesive floor plate that will be attractive to tenants, as well as an upgraded facade to again attract tenants to the building. So that construction should be underway starting sometime in January on that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's got to have a tremendous positive impact on downtown Worcester.
Yes.
It's got to be.
It's really kind of part of the whole master plan for the downtown as kind of a key building that will hopefully attract additional viable tenants to the downtown.
So when you get involved in a project, like you just mentioned the word master plan, when you get in a project like that, I would assume you'd have to become almost a content expert on what long-term plans are and what the city's vision for itself would be.
Correct, yes. And the main client on this is the Worcester Business Development Corporation. And they have a master plan that they've been looking at for the theater district, which this is kind of classified as because it's near the Hanover Theater. And so there's some long-range plans, some of which we've done some planning for restaurants, parking garages, and other supportive entities that would, make this part of the downtown more vibrant.
In listening to you, you must have a great sense of accomplishment when you're able to take a project like this, like any of the three, from literally nothing, or taking an old structure and making something new.
Yeah, it is very exciting, and when it comes to fruition and is being utilized to certainly enhance either the way people do their work or the way people experience, the city. It's very rewarding.
What are the challenges? What are in not just in your firm, but in your line of work? What's the hardest thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the hardest thing, to a certain extent, is basically balancing the business with the creativity, and you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. But kind of juggling all of the components of a project. You have the client, you have the budget, you have the schedule, you have the vision of what they're looking for versus what our vision might be. So it's really kind of coordinating all of that and coming up with a solution that's might be a little bit compromised because of all those factors, but ultimately is ideally the best solution for that particular project. And then seeing it happen. I mean, the worst thing is having design a project and then not have it happen.
It must be a challenge when you get into a project where you create a plan and you've got a vision well thought out, and then as it moves through the process of building the project, people must change things.
There's always changes. Always changes. That's kind of one of the key things that we do is change management. If you don't kind of record why you made certain decisions previously, sometimes we'll have, a few months later, we'll start to revisit this, and there's certain reasons why decisions are made, and we all need to be aware of why, we went in certain directions. And certainly, the code, all the code issues that we have to deal with on a daily basis, they're always changing. The access codes, you're starting to look at probably some sustainability codes that are going to be implemented, but having to juggle the creativity, but also have it compliant with code is also a challenge.
Well, you're doing all this great work, and you're doing it in Hopkinton. I've got to ask, would you ever consider moving?
Well, interestingly, over the years, we have thought of other locations. I mean, certainly a lot of architects are either in Cambridge or Boston, based on kind of their preference. But interestingly, having started in this area and really kind of built up a client base as really a suburban architect, we, live here in town, work here in town. It's kind of a good thing. So while we have considered other locations, we kind of like where we are.
That's great news. You also, with that in mind, I'm aware of the kind of activity and volunteerism, so to speak, that not just you, but members of your firm are involved in. You must have a philosophy about that.
Well, interestingly, as architects, a lot of times will be called in to sit on various committees, whether they're building committees or buildings and grounds committees and so on, just because we can lend that expertise to those groups. So right now I'm involved in the Hopkinton Library Building Committee, as well as the foundation to help raise funds for the much needed library expansion. So that's a project that we really feel very committed to and are supporting both not only time but financially as well. But yeah, we can offer a lot to various committees and nonprofits that we donate our time to. So,
if there were, and our time's running out, but very quickly, if you could lay out 3 sort of major projects that this community could benefit by over the next couple of years, what would they be?
well, I'd say some sort of community center that would be not only for maybe theatrical events, but also maybe from sporting events. So someplace where you could really have a multi-purpose facility. Certainly, the one thing that attracts a lot of people to this community are the outdoor activities. And certainly, just making sure that any trails we have are enhanced and expanded for those that really enjoy the outdoors. Certainly, the rail trail connection to Milford would be ideal. So, those are a couple things that come to mind, and maybe a museum.
What kind of museum?
It would be wonderful to have a marathon museum and Hall of Fame here in town.
Well, when we started, I thought we were going to run out of time, and we have, and I've already got you committed to coming back. Sure. And I think it would be fun to talk specifically about sort of the comments that you made towards the end here about not just what you're involved in the community, and there are several, but also sort of building what Hopkinton could look like in the year 2020. So if you're willing to do that, we'll schedule some time and get you back in here.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Tim Kilduff, and this has been Business Matters, and we promised to get Scott Richardson back to get him to talk about the kinds of activities that he and his firm are involved in Hopkinton. Appreciate you listening.